So
We good to go?
he looked at us. Let's move on.
Either one can. I think we can start if you want. We got a quorum, right?
You got us live?
So there's license, I got.
All right, we're gonna call the meeting to order. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? Not all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Conflicts of interest, if anyone has anything when we get to, just let us know. Are there any public comments?
Have anybody?
All right. Any supervisors here not seated as committee members that have any information for us?
No, I'm just here to listen.
All right, do we have any announcements, committee information? Be about a 5-minute meeting at this pace.
I'll change that.
All right, how about recommendations on the proposed 2021 operating capital improvements budget?
Russ, this is Mike Pritchard. Could you kind of run through what, that was a 146-page document, and I could probably take 3 hours with questions and comments, but what's our procedure going to be this afternoon?
I think the procedure you present it to the General Government Committee so that recommend that it's my proposed agenda, which will go to the board tonight. Then we'll talk about it, propose amendments, make suggestions, ask questions, and then at the November 10th board meeting is when you make the final decision.
A couple of prefatory comments, if I may. It would have been useful to have page numbers and an index for reference and talking about particular pages in the document. There were also, I think, 7 pages that may have been revised and duplicated or what, but the pages 96 to 103 and from 104 to 111 were covering the same subject matter, and I don't know if one was intended to be a correction. There might have been some minor differences in those pages from one to another. And I don't know if it's intended at some point we're going to see a revised one. I did pick up a number of what I thought were probably mistakes or things missing, one thing and another like that, and I'm assuming it's probably not our role to go through that type of thing.
Let's go through it, and then we can answer any questions you have or correct anything that you found. That's all right. You have here this document, which is the slides that I pulled up here. How did I get this up here? I don't see the arrows up here.
You're just touching it.
Yeah.
Touching the page.
Oh, I got them down here now. Okay, so we're going to go over the proposed budget. I'll begin with this.
You can just touch the screen, it'll go forward.
Okay. Here are the areas that we're going to be going over today in this proposed budget. The overall budget recommendation, we'll talk about property tax and levies, revenues by expenditures by category, personnel, capital expenditures. We're going to cover the stuff that those of you who've been here before we do every year. This is, as a reminder, our top priorities that we voted for. In fact, I apologize. We're missing some pages out of this. Okay. This is the priorities. I can read through here. The key things I want you to take away, and it should have been on the slide, is the 2020 budget strategy and the proposed outcome. So overall, what I can tell you is this budget was designed to align with board priorities, which you see right up here. The top ones are, of course, the most important, of which your committees are focused on. This is a disciplined approach to improve efficiencies, reduce waste, and contain taxes. In other words, what we said is we're going to stay flat on our budget. The uncertainties that are out there in the marketplace, departments and divisions come back to me, we're going to keep our budget relatively flat or flat. And then finally, design the budget to allow for future opportunities. And I think the key here, I'm going to pull this down. Keep the key here is I wanted a budget that not only covers the things that we need to cover, but because we set these priorities, and these are more long-term in nature, we wanted to make sure that we started our process of looking to the future and design a budget that's not only accountable for this year, but also sets the stage for future endeavors. And so that's what I think you're going to see in this. The outcomes of this budget. It's flat, except for the proposed capital project. And I mention that not because you've approved it and not because we're obligated to it, but I think it's only responsible as we're considering a capital investment into the government center that we included in here. If we make the policy decision not to include it in here, then it's hard to do it again. You know, you need 2/3 of a vote to say, hey, let's add it back in. But we've included it. We think it's important that we at least see what the effect of it is. Levy spending. We are allowed a certain level of levy spending. This year, we are coming in $400,000 under what we're allowed to spend. General principle, if we want to keep government as small where necessary, but we wanted to fund the things that we thought were important and then not throw stuff on top of that. You will have the opportunity as supervisors to see a list of additional items that were presented to us as options, but I did not put them in this budget. But you will have that option to say, hey, wait a minute, let's talk about that. We like this, and decide we don't like other things. By also reducing our levy or coming in $400,000 under it, that means that our mill rate is going to be less. And we'll show you the details on how much we're lowering the mill rate. Okay, this allows flexibility to engage in priorities, and FTEs are relatively flat. I mean, they are flat. We're actually down, like 0.85 of an FTE over last year. What you will see, though, is that we shifted these FTEs into priority areas. We'll go through that. So I'm going to see here. Oh, there it is. How'd you find it?
We use the other one.
A different presentation? Okay, good. So there are the summary points that I made. You see our mill rate is going down from 4.525 to 4.20 based on this budget. That's per $1,000. Okay, you've seen those. Equalized value. What equalized value means is that if it goes up, that's good for the county. That means the value of our properties are going up. That funds our tax revenues. It also means that we are having success in growth and development. which is all very important. We're up to over $5 billion. It's a 7.8% increase over last year. Yes.
I just have a comment. Something I wanted to point out is that you're talking about equalized values, but what we actually collect taxes on are assessed values and not equalized values. So even though equalized value is rising is a good thing, until communities undergo reevaluation, we don't see that in what we levy taxes on. We don't levy taxes based on equalized values. We levy taxes based on assessed values unless there's something different about counties than there is about any other taxing jurisdiction in the state that I don't know about.
I think in the bigger county aspect, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason it's equalized is because not everybody gets their properties assessed at the same time and so on. So you
Yeah,
get
I know what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought we went off of equalized value.
No, that's not what you are levy taxes on it. It would be assessed.
All right. The tax levy calculation summary. As you can see, our mill rate was 4.525 under the new calculations at the 4.27, 5,333,000,000 equalized value. The allowable levy was 22.2 million. We are now going down to, and what's allowed in this year is 22,772. We're actually bringing in at 22,359. The added net new construction, which folks are always interested in because of its importance to the county. New construction allows our levy to go up. Actually increased by 1.082. That's slightly below what it did the year before. So. The tax levy. Wanted to show this again. We have a history of lowering that tax levy each year. From 2016 to 2021, we have dropped each year. The nice thing is this year under this proposed budget, our drop will be 0.325%. And as that stands, that's the largest reduction since 2016. Sales tax is always an interesting calculator. It's a very important driver to our revenues. And as you recall, when the COVID situation hit, we were very concerned about what would happen. We took a hit in February and March, and then Polk County rebounded nicely. You can see the history of total revenues, of sales tax across the years. We projected 3.375 this year. We're actually going to finish higher than that because the county has done better than expected. Next year, we're budgeting in an estimated 3.6 million. Now, that may not be, it may be higher than that, but we're also taking a very conservative approach to this because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy. And if you read the papers and the reports, read unemployment, you see shifts. Chad was telling me this morning that there's a report out now that the white collar workers are getting laid off at a higher rate now. So as it affects different people, it might affect this county differently. So we took a conservative approach. Okay, you probably will have to look at your handout at this. This is budget and levy by fund. And I think the things that I would point out here, first of all, our general fund balances out the revenues and expenditures. And then in addition to that, the things that might jump out, a contingency fund of 177 million. That's slightly higher, I shouldn't say slightly, 35 million higher or so than last year. And the reason for that is we think with our long-term goals, we think with COVID, we think that, there might be opportunities that come up where we say, we haven't budgeted for this, but let's make sure it's there. It's kind of like our rainy day fund, in which we say, if we have to spend something, if there's an issue with the department, a building or whatever, we can dig into that. You will note, if you're studying those numbers, the contingency fund was at $223,000. The $46,600 is a contingency we put in there in the event that the resolution that's proposed tonight by Ms. Duncanson on library funding is adopted. If it is, that's where we'll pull that money from. So we put that in there in anticipation that could happen. ADRC, if you look over in the right-hand column, the difference, you see they're down $45,000. They get that money from their own, not from the general fund, but from their internal fund. They have kind of a savings account from year to year, and they will pull it from that. The trails is the other one on this page that has a difference from last year of $33,000. That could be snowmobile trails, other trails in this county. And in this case, we've received grant money and funding that surpasses what we'll spend. So that's the difference there. As we continue here, you might notice, if you're looking on your paper, you look at recycling. Short term, it's a positive, but that's the one where we think because of increased fees, tipping fees and so on, will come out okay this year. But the real expense is the years after that, the 4 or 5 years in our capital improvement plan where things are going to have to be changed there, fixed, updated, repaired, and that's where it gets expensive.
Chad, a question on the highway 701. It ends up with a deficit of $596,000.
Yes.
What's the rationale for the deficit?
That is money that is set aside. That's money that has been set aside for a federal program on County Road M. And so I think our highway commissioner, when they receive funds, and as I'll probably explain it wrong, but he stores in a fund the monies and then uses them, pulls them out when they're needed for these types of programs. So that's money that's sitting in an account right now.
The $596,000?
Yes.
And that's federal money.
Was that the source of it?
No, that's set aside. That's money we set aside every year for our cost share or our 80-20 share with our federal projects. We get a federal project every so many years. This year, the construction phase of M goes through in 2021, and our share of that is covered with these funds. We set aside $100,000 to $200,000 a year in our budget for these projects.
I guess what I am confused by is that we have $3,000,004 for levy, $8,000,004 for total, and $5 million for non-levy revenue. So we end up on the right-hand column with 596,000 deficit. I still don't understand if that 596 exists or doesn't exist or what.
Yes, Mr. Pritchard, that money is calculated in our fund balance that we carry to utilize these funds when these projects come available. So they're in our fund balance at the highway.
That would be helpful to asterisk that or whatever. I guess that's not included in non-levy revenue then. Was it received in a different accounting period or what?
We set aside money every year, dedicated funds for these projects. In every budget, we set aside $100,000 to $200,000 depending on the year. So we're covering these costs at a future date.
So this goes back 3 or 4 years or 3 years or something?
It's ongoing every year. Since I've been at Highway the past 15 years, we set aside money for these federal projects that we get every 2 to 5 years to cover our costs.
The bottom line is it's a $62 million budget. When I said it's flat, that compares with 62.5 million. Compared to last year was about 57 million. But if you take out the 5.9 million in the proposed bonding, that puts us down actually slightly below what the budget was last year. Again, on the theme of showing fiscal constraint. The next page, levy allocations by department. The key there, you can see the differences. If you are looking at your sheet, I'm going to move on to the next page, which I highlight where those are, which might help. But first, in administration, there's a decrease in the general fund. This is due to the increase in sales tax and controlling expenses, which is what we undertook considerably beginning last March. Also, we have increased our contingency fund there, as I had mentioned. Our debt payment has dropped due to falling debt application. I believe we paid $2.8 million for the year last year, or this year, and next year it will be 2.4 million. So we've reduced that by 400,000. The buildings, the increases in maintenance costs and improved capital expenditure, or approved capital expenditures. The circuit court area, it's increasing costs for court-appointed attorneys and an additional commissioner. Corporation counsel, decrease in personnel costs and an increase in state aids. The decrease of 0.5 FTEs reallocated to the county clerk's office. That's an example of where we are shifting headcount to areas that we think are needed. The county clerk, we are decreasing in professional expenses. On the other hand, we are adding a half FTE to a deputy clerk position. That's some of the changes. Some others. Forestry is a little different. That's mostly because of timber sales are down, and when timber sales are down and they don't generate the revenue, it comes out of our general fund. IT is an area of priority for us. Cybersecurity, reliability. We had aging and unreliable equipment, and it got to the point, for those of you, I'm sure, who have been here, it got to the point where we were at a danger area. And so we are committing more in terms of cybersecurity, updating equipment, capital expenditures, and so on. And also you'll see throughout here things like reallocation of general government director, 0.3 FTE. So that's under the divisional model that we have. It's important that we allocate FTEs where they go. And since Chad, for example, is in charge of the IT department, in charge of the finance department and HR, we've kind of spread him out budget-wise to those areas. Land and water resources. The divisional mode, we've reallocated a little bit there as well. Led to their reduced levy. In addition, we're adding a 0.5 FTE to conduct the Balsam Lake watershed study that's coming up. In land information, still in the environmental services division, we're adding 1 FTE for zoning, and this person will be involved in zoning, and then also will be a compliance officer or a compliance technician. And that headcount's being reallocated from the community services division. And then also, if you recall, when we created P-TAG or TAG committee last year, we were going to take $50,000 as seed money. We haven't used that this year, and so actually it was going to be out of the administrator's contingency fund. Well, now we have that money budgeted for 2021. And that's coming out of land information. And then law enforcement, another priority with crime, reduced substance abuse. We are reducing our capital expenditures in 21 versus 20. Increasing personnel costs for there's a 1 FTE recreational deputy position. That person's allocated from the line quarter. So that person, with our focus and commitment on trails and parks and recreation and tourism, we are upping their FTE in that area, which is an area that they need. We don't have one. And then also we're moving a corrections officer position to a corrections lieutenant position to help in the jail management. Other notable developments, the museum, if you recall at the general government committee meeting last time, we're going to repair that wall that's, I don't know, I just went by there the other day and there is a hole in that wall and it's got plywood to kind of keep it, I guess, off of the public. One-time allocation for marketing and development. They've asked for $25,000 to help pay for their director, which is a recurring cost. They came to us at the last minute. I think it's a worthy project, a worthy event. My thought is, given that they have a lot of money in a checking account just sitting there, rather than fund them at such a high level right out of the chute, I'm proposing a $10,000 marketing seed money to help them identify so that they can actually, then we can assess, because I think if they have an administrator or executive director, they can do some fundraising. They can get volunteers. And to me, to do $25,000 right out of the chute year after year seems aggressive. Yeah.
So are we looking, Vince, at that at 25,000 or 10?
I'm saying it again.
For the director position, are we looking at the county's contribution as 25,000 or 10?
My recommendation is 10.
Just 10, and then.
And with the cap, we're targeting it. We think, based on what they told us, sure, they can apply it how they want, but we're recommending that they take that as a marketing seed money to say, what can we do for the museum? How can this new administrator that they're going to hire anyway, they've got a good substantial amount of money in their checking account. We said, let's see what they can do in 1 year and evaluate next year.
So is there an MOU in place about any of this?
We do not have an MOU yet. And what we did do, they are going to name a county supervisor as an ex officio member of the board for this year. That's, I think they decided Mr. Nelson last time. But no, that would be something that we would certainly do if we're going to approve giving them money. Just work on an MOU. Okay, outside agencies. If you recall,
This is Mike. Can I ask you a question on the museum again?
Sure.
The document had in one place was replace the wall, and another place it was repair the wall. I heard you say repair a minute or two ago.
I apologize. They're going to tear down that wall and grade it up toward the building.
Is that something that the Historical Society is on board with?
Yes, that's their recommendation.
Because of the wall itself, in my mind, is historical.
Well,
Anyway, that's. I thought that we had, as a committee, we had recommended or voted on the $25,000 funding for a half salary for an executive director. And did we not do that at our September meeting or our October meeting for that matter?
No, I don't believe so. It was discussed, and I know that a couple of supervisors seemed in favor of that, but that was merely a discussion.
What would be the procedure for getting a $25,000 provision for the executive director? And I was one of those who got excited about that concept.
I believe you would make an amendment to the budget, which we would vote on.
At tonight's meeting, or?
We could do it tonight, probably tonight would be a good time.
I would propose if we can make recommendations from the committee, I would propose that we do include a $25,000 amount for 50% of compensation for an executive director, and have that as a recommendation coming from the General Government Committee.
Do we do that now, or might we do that at the end of when we're out of this discussion?
So you've got a couple of options. I don't think that making recommendations is queued up on your agenda for today. You're just now, receiving the information. Most amendments come in November once various committees and individual board members have had that time to digest what you present as an administrator. I suppose they could make in committee of the whole some recommendations on some changes, but generally speaking, the process would be you present, they individually and as committees contemplate amendments, and then they ask for those amendments in November.
No recommendations or proposed amendments allowed at this meeting of the General Government Committee?
Well, I don't want to use the word allowed, but I don't know that action was noticed as an agenda item, just for open meetings law compliance purposes. But would you get in trouble? Probably not. If you,
It was consideration of the budget. I think it said it says discussion and possible action, resolution calling for public hearing on the proposed operating capital improvement budget. Recommendations on the proposed 2021 item 7 and item 8.
If I can make a suggestion, this proposal, I believe, is on our menu of items for the supervisors to consider. So, at the very end, you will see that list of items that supervisors can make policy on. And that would certainly, that we built that in there as a time when you can make amendments or proposals to add things or take away things from the budget.
Well, I would read both items 7 and 8 on our agenda for this committee meeting as permitting a recommendation coming out of the committee.
the recommendation is allocation. That's the action contemplated.
Now, Mike, I don't think we're not going to take any at this meeting. I mean, we need to get the presentation on the administrator's budget, and then we'll have our opportunity to modify it.
Well, the word recommendations is in the agenda. That's all my point.
That was a recommendation. She said. Okay. Can I continue? Okay. I would say, the EDC, it's carried over from last year. It was approved in last year's budget because of COVID. Their workforce strategy was not implemented. That will be done this year, so we carried that forward. Tourism, $70,000 budget. They asked for an extra $5,000 for a website. That is one where I did include that in. They are in need of a website. I don't think they did their complete homework as to what this is going to cost, but I do think it's something that they need to commit to. They have a little money in their checking account. I think with that extra $5,000, they can do it. My recommendation is that they do that really in harmony with the EDC, with the museum, and some of our other tourist potential activities to make sure that we're all communicating. Parks, additional FTE. We've actually created a parks department now. You will see an investment in our parks since it is a priority. We now have a department under the Public Safety, Public Works Division where they have the equipment, they have the manpower. They will be tasked with upgrading, repairing, cleaning up the parks, and actually building or enhancing those things. And then solid waste and recycling. We have some increased personnel costs, allocation under the divisional model again, workers' comp, and some other things that caused that change there. Okay, these are fund balances that are being used. This is not from the general fund, if you're familiar with these. Asset fund, when a department needs us to purchase something for them and then that department pays us back over so many years, we're in the negative there. ADRC, again, they will be in the negative. However, they do have their fund that they carry over and they'll be pulling that from their fund. The highway, we mentioned that, $596,000, a big one. But because we continue to put that money away into our general fund, that is able to be used for the federal project slotted for County Highway M next year. Lime is in the negative. That includes a $580,000 contract for custom crushing. Of course, you know that we're coming up on a period where we're entertaining offers to buy that. We may be selling, which would affect that. Fleet vehicle, just simply something that we have fleet vehicles. I think with COVID, we are not using the vehicles as much as we used to. We don't charge the departments as much now. Because of that, we're in the negative there. I mentioned trails earlier, and GAM, hats off to Dana Reese and her crew running a tight ship. We anticipate them being in the positive this year, which is outstanding given their headcount is down in terms of clients. Okay, the general fund balance. This is something that hats off to previous administrations and staff for all the work that they've done to get our general fund up there. The unassigned general fund in 2019 increased over $2 million. The overall general fund increased about $1.8 million. And our unassigned percentage went to 51.3. So we continue to move in that right direction. The state would suggest that I think it's about 35% area is where they recommend, and we're at 50%. That's not uncommon. Most, probably half the counties have that much as well. So we are there. So keep that in mind when we think about future priorities. Because if we continue to grow, not like we're planning on it, but we are conservative, and when we get more sales tax or when we reduce costs, we add to that general fund. That may be something we could think about using parts of it in the future. Here are, Mr. Pritchard, I think we can look on here, but these are the additional funding requests, which I did not put in the budget for one reason or another, but they are something that I would offer to the board to say these are the types of things, that someone might make an amendment or a proposal to say, I think we should include these types of things. So let's see, Kim is not here. Forestry.
Vince, just a question on this, what we're looking at here. That wasn't in the budget 143-page document, was it?
What was that?
This.
Yes, that was in the original
It was
document.
in there.
It is in there? I didn't see it. That doesn't mean it isn't, but what do you have any idea of where about in the packet it was or not?
I don't. Read that on your computer.
I can see it right now.
Okay. Um, if you can read those, you'll get a sense for types of things that came in. Some of these are certainly, all of them might be worthy. But at some point, the decision was we needed to limit what we spent and control it. But yet, I know supervisors may have a different things that I thought you might. And that's something again. Look about, think about it, and either tonight or as we go into November 10th. If there's anything we have, the facilities, the courtroom, LED lighting in the courthouse. Certainly, we probably need to do it. We're going to be doing some work there, some capital improvements, some rearranging in about 3 years. So one thought is, could we wait till then? Of course, the other thought is we're going to be doing some new cameras and microphones in courtroom 3 because we need that space now with COVID. And so we may be tearing up some walls and ceilings anyway. So it is, Chad posed that question to me today. It may be something that as you think about, and as I gather more information, we may say that's worth it. The key here is what I like to look at too, look at the one-time versus the recurring. When you make a vote today for those recurring expenses, that kind of commit to future years. Capital improvements plan, and for time's sake, it's in front of you. It's in your packet there and those slides. You can look through there. I am going to go to some of the summaries as opposed to going through all of those. Just know, and I've been impressed with our division directors. They've been working on these obviously every year. And so they have a plan. They update it every year. You've probably seen most of these items in there before, but obviously there are always changes, especially as you get close to it. Some of the highlights are things that might jump out at you. Again, I've included the 5.9 million in here, not that we're obligated to it, but rather we're considering that to say, it's a possibility. Things like fairgrounds, $30,000. Actually, I think we were supposed to spend $15,000 this year, $15,000 next year for the office, or the administrative office at the fairgrounds. We held off on that because we don't have an MOU. And it's in the budget because if we do get an MOU in place and we do proceed, we think it's a safety issue that we need to take care of. So I've included it in here. That's a whole nother debate. 8,000 we mentioned for the museum wall. The highway has obviously a lot of capital improvement planning and spending for aging equipment, upcoming road projects. The 109,000 for the parks plan for improvements is substantial. In fact, notes here on that. Okay. So the 109,000 for the parks plan and improvements and repairs of multiple parks. Lime quarry, we took all of it out for 2021 because we might sell it. And if we do, we weren't going to invest in that yet. But the key is over the next 4 years, because of if we do keep it, the capital improvements, we're projecting at about $855,000 over the next 4 years. IT, we mentioned that as a priority, $1 million over 5 years. Aging outdated equipment, reliability, and security. And then law enforcement, another one of our priorities is about $100,000 in computers. That's the law enforcement. So the computers in their squad cars, we've extended their life longer than they're supposed to be there, we have to replace those. So that's coming up. Recreational officers, with our priority on the next. I have a vote. I don't know if the vote's going to happen or not. I'll make sure to do that. But they do need a boat, and I think it's going to help that enforcement officer in their activity.
Vince, can I ask on the IT, there was a note on their section of the packet, and it said, current staffing levels are not sufficient to support the current level of ticket volumes as well as effectively manage the current infrastructure. Third parties are used when needed. However, this also delays resolution of many items due to lack of expertise and so on key technologies. Time has caused a delay in the number of tickets and so on. Is this $1 million intending to address that concern, or is that something that needs more immediate attention?
We are working with the IT director. That what you're reading is his request and his argument. But in evaluating the circumstances and actually in discussions with him, we don't have to have the personnel increase this year, but rather with the equipment purchase, with the software equipment and so on, we're going to be adequately staffed to handle that. Now, in the future, you may see the need in our IT department to add people, but not this year. Okay.
Can I interject real quick on the CIP, just real quick to clarify, Mr. Pritchard, it's page 4 of the document you're working at is the beginning of the CIP.
Okay. Yeah, I can read that. I'm reading it right now, but on the packet, on the budget packet, it had that note. And I know that a lot of people are getting hit with big software payments for continuing their software subscriptions in effect. But anyway.
Vince, you gonna get this done in 11 minutes?
Yes,
All right.
I may beat that time. Investing in our team, this is another priority. We are going to have a 2.5% pay raise. This is a comparative. The last 3 years has been 2.7. I think when Dana last said it, that based on the factors of that marketplace. Now, when we look at things like the cost of living, COLA, when we look at comparators of other counties, we want to be competitive, but the cost of living is down to like 1.6 is the latest estimate. So we are edging that down to make it responsive to today's environment. We think 2.5 is a good raise for cost of living that will, in fact, keep us very competitive with the other surrounding counties. GAM is going to get a raise. They haven't had a raise for a few years. Now, part of that is because we have a resolution that says unless they make money, we don't give a raise. We also pay them a very good competitive price because we have to pay those professionals at a higher level than might be normal in this area. Because if we don't, they drive across the river or they go to Minnesota and they work there. So, but many of those folks have maxed out in terms of what their pay is. And because they don't always turn a profit in that situation, they haven't got one. This year, other than the Wisconsin pension encumbrance, which has nothing to do with them, but the state said we need more money for this, they would have made a profit. And given the activities during this COVID time, we thought this would be a good time to implement that 2% pay raise for them. Again, they are an enterprise fund. They work exclusively on their own. So we work with Dana to make sure that that's within her budget. Keeping benefits competitively. We talked about we're going to do some things that are going to make the employees happy. We're going to increase our contribution to the HSA family and single high deductible plans. We're going to lower their cost of dental by increasing our contribution. And we're moving our dental plan to self-insured to save $25,000 this year in administrative costs. What am I doing, Russ? Okay. Finally, we have great people in this organization. We lose great people in this organization. We hire people. One of the things we haven't done a lot is promote people from within. We're going to develop our team members. We're going to have some work on these areas of succession planning, leadership and management training, untapped talent, tap into that to identify people who might be strong in environmental services, but they could be a great director in community service. Why do we have to keep people in a silo? Why can't we take the best talent and move them around? So we're going to start developing people in those ways. At the same time, we are controlling our FTE. Our technology is helping us do that, our improved IT, and we are moving current FTEs around. I think this is my last one. This should illustrate our FTE. The brown, what's brown on here, represents Polk County government FTEs, including Golden Age Manor. You see a big drop this year. That's because of the census at GAM. It's down so much, they don't have as many employees. But if you look at the rest of Polk County government, you can see we went from 329.79 to 328.94. So that is so basically we're redirecting headcounts to other areas. Those areas, of course, parks, environmental services, law enforcement, and the clerk's office. Questions? I think we're about done.
I do need to clarify for the group. I didn't want to step in during the administration. The county uses equalized value. We use state equalized value. Wisconsin has a dual levy system, a dual valuation system. Municipalities use assessed. Counties use equalized because equalized is typically higher than assessed. So as equalization values go, so goes the county levy value. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. That's my presentation. We've got a lot of papers in front of you. I can answer questions. I think what we tried to accomplish, keep that budget flat, redirect resources where they need it. We think we're going to have a reduced mill rate for the citizens.
All right, very good. All right, we need a
You can see it
discussion
again.
and possible action on resolution 3920. A resolution calling for a public hearing on the proposed 2021 operating capital improvements budget.
So to clarify, this publication would go, I would write it as is unless a decision is made at the board meeting tonight to make any adjustments to the budget. We would publish on that. And then between October and November 12th, if the committee's decided, oh, we do want to put this on the budget, we would do an amendment at the November meeting. But this resolution is what we publish after tonight's.
All right, so we need a motion from this committee to move resolution 3920 onto the county board with the recommendation or without, whatever you choose. Someone wants to make that motion?
So move.
With the recommendation or without?
With.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any more discussion on the resolution? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our subject matters for our next meeting, I think we did them at our last meeting, and I think we already got them pretty full. Unless someone has something. If not, we take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned at 5:55? 54.
What time did this start? Was this a continuation?
Well, you're gonna start.